Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Fox.
Siena has a beautiful campus. Do you know what would make it even more beautiful?
What's that, Kevin?
It needs some red.
Actually, I was thinking Marist could use a little more green.
Well, you saw my intro, and therefore you are correct in hearing that Siena and Marist agreed to a deal. So Siena President Chuck Cipher and Marist President Kevin Weinman agreed that if Marist wins a game, Siena must light their dome up in red. Meanwhile, Marist will have to light its rotunda up green if Marist loses. And thanks to a women's basketball victory, Marist will now have to light its rotunda up in green because the Siena women headed down to Poughkeepsie to play against them for just the second time in 2 weeks. As you can see here, it was a Siena victory. And Marist is fifth in the MAAC, and they're pretty solid. They're definitely better than they were last year. They've had a lot of success, including the recruitment of center Morgan Lee, who is 6'5", plus some continued success from notable players, including Kiara Croker and Jackie Pittick, who hails from Adams, which is just 3 hours away from here. But Anijah Jackson, I'm very happy she decided to stay an extra year because she definitely had some unfinished business. Now the third player in Siena history to reach 200 career-made threes. Jackson, aside from her magical run, also had Teresa Sapala, who is now on record to have become one of the all-time leading scorers in the Siena College program. She had 18 points, near perfect shooting. The free throw line just continues to be her best friend. She's still number one in the nation with free throws. Meanwhile, another record for Anijah Brown, she's now having 600 rebounds. She got 500 a month ago. And Zariah Price led Siena with 7 boards. And then Miriam Traore, once again, a three-pointer at the buzzer. This was not half court, but still a three-pointer at the buzzer regardless. And she is also the leading scorer among the freshmen. Meanwhile, for Marist, it was Morgan Lee with 26 points. Lexi Tarul had 16. At one point during the second quarter, the Red Foxes were within 2 points, but unfortunately, it was Zariah Price, Anijah Brown, and Teresa Sapala, which were pretty much dominating the paint, and Marist could not get past them. Siena went on a 9-0 run in the third quarter, which pretty much ballooned the lead up to as much as 16 points. Marist never recovered from there. And just some history facts for you. The Red Foxes currently are 40-37 all-time against the Saints in the women's program. And inside McCann Arena, where Marist plays its home games, it was the Pink Zone game for the Red Foxes, much like how Siena hosted Marist for their Pink Zone game. Pretty much it was the same deal over at Marist. The cheerleaders were dressed all in pink, as well as the dance team, and some of the spectators attending as well. And it was a great game for the Siena women once again. They're knocking on the door for a possible contender alongside Quinnipiac and Fairfield. And before they head to Fairfield, Siena will host another Fairfield team in Sacred Heart. We'll talk about that after we discuss the men. So obviously the Marist men off to a fantastic start this season, despite the fact that a lot of their wins have been pretty close. They've still had some success, including a shocker over Richmond this year, which the Spiders haven't been doing that well anyway, and they're currently in the basement of the Atlantic 10, so not surprised. Marist has also had some MAAC victory success as well, but recently they've been starting to show their vulnerability. They lost at an absolute buzzer bomb to Fairfield last week, and then they also lost to Iona over at home. Plus, Riders smoked them as well back in January. Then they played Siena, and despite the fact that the Marist Foxes did win, Siena still hung tough, and they chomped away at a possible overtime thriller until the turnovers happened, and Marist went down from there victorious. And now Marist is currently third in the MAAC, behind Merrimack and Quinnipiac. Merrimack recently ballooned itself up to the number 1 spot, which is impressive for a first-teamer for the MAAC this year. Now let's talk about somebody who is no stranger to either team, John Dunn, the head coach at the Marist Red Foxes since 2018. Dunn, who is 54 years old, started off at the MAAC in 1998 when he was the assistant coach at Manhattan, and then afterwards he went to Siena to be the assistant coach under Paul Hewitt. For 2 years, he led the Siena Saints to some success. They went to the NIT, and then when Louis Orr took over, Dunn was also the assistant coach as well before eventually leaving to go to Seton Hall alongside Orr. From there, Dunn went back to the MAAC to get the first ever head coaching job in his career at St. Peter's in 2006. He brought the Peacocks to a lot of success, including a 26-14 season in 2016. And in 2017, he went to the collegeinsider.com postseason tournament. Notably, one of the players there was Travis Weish, who is now going to be the head coach of the upcoming New York Phoenix. Their first game is February 28th, if anyone's interested. In 2018, Dunn got the head coaching job over at Marist, and, Dunn, despite the fact that he has not brought the Red Foxes to any postseason so far, still is looking like he could be a contender. I mean, this season has been the best in his career at Marist thus far. Plus, he's had some success with notable players, including G League player Patrick Gardner, Ryan Funk, as well as MAAC Rookie of the Year in 2022, Jao Ituka. He also had player Max Allen last year go pro. Allen was one of the leading scorers for the Red Foxes. Unfortunately, his absence did kind of put a dent in the Red Foxes. I think that they could have used him now, especially with Jackson Price being injured. But still, friendly rivalry with John Dunn, who has enjoyed coming back to Loudonville every year, and today was no different.
You get loud! You look crazy! Marist had 2,000 students at their game! You look lame! Woo! Defense!
Well, February 14th is Valentine's Day, and Siena College, which unfortunately withdrew its sponsorship from Professional Fire Restoration, the guys that used to do the kiss cam at all of the games, had a bit of an issue because Valentine's Day was on a Friday, and it happened to be a Siena home game. But Siena did bring back the kiss cam, thankfully, just with a different sponsor. In case anyone's wondering where PFRS went to, they went to UAlbany. So, you could bring your sweetheart to a Siena basketball game, treat him to a possible Saints victory over Marist, and eventually, all of the hearts at Siena College were going to be warmed. That did not happen. Unfortunately, it was a defeat to a Siena team that tried to defeat Marist, but unfortunately, it was dismal free throw shooting that did the Saints in. And you're looking at the score right here. 1 point loss thanks to a three-pointer at the end. Saints missing their free throws, as well as a half-court shot, which did not go in at the end. Sent the Saints into another loss, their 14th overall on the season. And speaking of half-court shots, let's talk about Justice Schultz, because he is our player spotlight. Schultz was aggressive in the first half. He took the ball away from a lot of the Marist players, stunned them, and as a matter of fact, the Saints held a commanding lead by as many as 17 during the very beginning. And then Schultz gave a half-court heave that went right in the net, and everyone thought it was going to go in. It did not go in. Grrr. The buzzer happened to end the moment the ball sank right inside the net. So, a case of bad timing, the refs took it off, and therefore the Saints were now leading Marist by 13. The culprit of the three-pointer at the end was Marist's Elijah Lewis. 20.4 seconds in, Lewis actually led the Red Foxes, 14 points. Josh Pasquarelli with 12. Jaden Daughtry with a high of 13 rebounds. And Jaden Collins-Roberts had a team-high 4 assists. And also, there were plenty of Marist players with quite a few fouls, and Siena was hoping to try to foul them as much as possible. They also tried their full-court pressure, but Marist was able to be oblivious to that. And some other numbers for you. This was Marist's 800th program victory, and this was the 700th all-time MAAC contest for the Siena Saints. To show you how dismal the Saints were in the second half, they only shot 24%, and the free throw shootings were equally as rough. They had 35 attempts, but they misfired on 13 of them. Oh, and as for leading scorers, Gavin Doty had 20 points. Siena also rewarded Joe, the man from last game where he took his shirt off and partied over getting free beer for a year. He got a gift card from Broadview Federal Credit Union, and he also won an award from Northeastern Fine Jewelry. He lost his wedding ring at the arena when he won the free beer for a year, and thankfully, Valentine's Day miracle right here, the arena found the ring, and he picked it up. And I could say that's definitely been a good thing about this season is the fans are back, and also the energy in general has just been a lot more electric, and the Saints, usually up until this point, were pretty solid at home. Their only loss was against Iona in MAAC competition at home, and that was decided by a possession change. And yeah, again, it was another heartbreaking loss, and unfortunately the Saints still need to get above 500, and now the question is whether or not the MAAC tournament will be a possibility for them. I still think it is, and the Saints still think it is, because, look, you can't win every game, but just looking at the standings right now, Siena is in 8th place, but teetering on 9th. And their next contest is at Sacred Heart, which doomed them at the very beginning. And seeing that this is a home match, and a stat about Sacred Heart I'm about to bring up when we do our MAAC schedule recap, this is going to be an interesting game to watch. Speaking of Sacred Heart, it was the women's rematch against the Pioneers over at their school. The Pioneers and the Saints, on the women's side at least, have played each other in the past, as I've talked about before. And now that they're part of the MAAC, they will have to get comfortable with each other. And the Pioneers, which I did not mention in the last video, recently came off of a historic run. They were the NEC frontrunners for the women's edition of March Madness, and under head coach Jessica Minetti, they had some success. In 2023, they went to the NCAA Women's First Four to play against Southern, where they won 57-47, followed by a game against Stanford, which, you're playing against Tara Vanderveer, you're going to lose. And then in 2024, they once again went to the First Four. This time they lost to Presbyterian. Unfortunately, Minetti's team hasn't been able to capitalize a lot since they've entered the MAAC, and they are currently in the basement dwelling of the MAAC right now. And when they made the trip to Loudonville, they knew it wasn't going to be an easy task considering the fact that Siena smoked them at home. The Saints won the game. The final score was 51-66. And at the beginning, they did kind of test Siena a little bit. Sacred Heart went on a 9-0 run, and midway through the first quarter, it was 13-9. But then the fouls came calling, and Sacred Heart was now losing most of its steam. The highest lead was by 6, entering the second quarter, when the Saints were down 14-20. It was not a very good free-throwing game for Teresa Sapala, who, as I've said before, is the nation's #1 free-throw shooter in college hoops. The 97% free throw shooter extended her streak to 41 consecutive free throws, but then, in the third quarter, her streak ended at 42. But still, that was a great run she had. You could call her the Ken Jennings of the MAAC. It was Anaja Brown with the leading score for the game. She had a season high of 23, and she also had 7 rebounds to extend her career, and she also had a high of 6 blocks. And look at this play from KB Hadley right here. Tumbles to the floor, and one. The Saints were also very good defensively as well, and Sacred Heart could not get past them. The Pioneers did have a good player in Nicierra Pryor, who had the game from the last time the Saints were over there. She had 24. However, in general, their shooting percentage was only about 30.
Some other stats of note: Anijah Jackson did not play for most of the game due to a technical foul called. And Amelia Wood, a native of Averill Park, who plays for Sacred Heart, had a homecoming over in Loudonville. Some of her family was there to watch the game.
They are now at 14 wins and 10 losses. And it just seems to be getting easier for them out for the future because the Western New York trip is coming up. And they're not exactly the MAAC's best teams, but still, Siena must be having safety first on their radar. Looking at most of the scores for this week, you can show how close most of the games are in the MAAC. Rider beat Iona 74-71, another close win for the Bronx following their victory over Siena last week. In a surprising turn of events, the Merrimack men lost to Manhattan 75-79. St. Peter's also got a victory over Fairfield over at their school, 65-52. And then it was another rematch against the Western New York teams. The games were not played during the normal week. They played earlier in the week with the women playing on Tuesday and the men playing on Wednesday. Canisius extending their loss streak. They are now at 2-22, losing to Niagara. And Sacred Heart losing to Quinnipiac 99-90. And that's been a trend with a lot of Sacred Heart's men's games, is that the scores have been very high. They do tend to threaten you to score a lot more than you're used to. And another matchup to highlight was Mount St. Mary's making the Western New York trip as well. They played Niagara first, and this was another close game for the Purple Eagles. They lost to the Mount 83-84. For the MAAC women, Rider played against Iona as well, lost 60-65, and then a close matchup against St. Peter's, losing 54-55. Close loss for the Manhattan women over to Merrimack, 69-71, and then they got obliterated by Fairfield, which is now undefeated in MAAC competition. The Fairfield women also smoked St. Peter's by 30 points. And then the Battle of Western New York for the women's side was eerily close and low scoring. The score was only 48-46, and it was Niagara's closest loss of the season, but unfortunately the Purple Eagles still cannot connect, and they still have not gotten a Division I victory yet. Canisius also lost to the Mount St. Mary's women, 59-72. The Quinnipiac women then played against Sacred Heart and Iona. They won over both teams. The Marist women also got a matchup against Merrimack, and the Warriors are now on a winning streak. They also beat Marist. And then Mount St. Mary's women played Niagara, and to no surprise, Niagara was down by the Mount by 21 points. And I could say one thing, that despite the fact that the Western New York trip may look like an easy do for Siena, still, it is at their home schools, so they will have an advantage. And looking at how close it was against Canisius, I don't know, I don't want to count them out. For the MAAC Players of the Week, Adam Bud Clark of Merrimack once again getting the award alongside Mackay Connor of Sacred Heart. Clark had a career-high 32 points against the Niagara Purple Eagles, and he also tied his career high in steals. He had 6. Connor had a career high as well in SHU's first ever win over Fairfield last week. I had no idea about that. For the women, Rayana Brown, who is a road runner, as they called their forwards, led the Stags in scoring. She averaged 22 points. She is the very first Fairfield player to get perfect free throws. She's basically the Teresa Sapala of Fairfield, I'll take it. And Winner Bartholomew. I mentioned her last video when the Saints played Rider. Despite the fact that the Bronx lost to the Saints, she still tied her career high for 17 points. So, good on her. Next week, after the men play Sacred Heart over at their school, it's the Western New York rematch. The Western New York teams, Niagara and Canisius, make the trip to Albany, while the women make the trip up to their schools. First on tap is the Niagara Purple Eagles, which beat Siena in the MAAC opener by 1 point. Niagara, now out of the basement, thankfully, but still possible chance for the Purple Eagles to win if they keep it up. Meanwhile, for Canisius, they're also out of the basement as well, and the women could easily get a loss there, since it's a Canisius home game. The Canisius men are still not doing good, and the Niagara women also still not doing good. They played some games this week, as I just mentioned earlier, and that was decided very closely, so just have to keep my eyes peeled. To close this out, let's talk about Marcus Jackson, because he skipped the week to go watch his brother Andre play in the NBA Slam Dunk Contest. His brother Andre played for UConn collegiately, played for UConn's 2023 National Championship team, and now plays for the Milwaukee Bucks. Here's a little video of Andre doing his dunks.
Part of the voting process tonight.
He's my favorite. He's my favorite, Kevin.
So let me ask you a question. We've seen his in-game dunks.
Yes.
How is he like in a stage environment like
look
that?
how fast he's going. It's going to be crazy. Oh, he slipped. He slipped.
Yep.
He slipped right before he got there.
Yep.
He slipped.
The broken-in shoes that are still a little slippery. You
He switched up. He switched up.
Oh, yes, he did.
Oh.
So those are nerves.
2 attempts left.
Oh. His name's Action Jackson. The other Action Jackson who couldn't jump over a piece of paper.
Oh.
Now that.
And what Action Jackson is that?
His first name's Mark.
Oh, my goodness.
Come on, babe. Come on. Calm down, baby. You got this.
Take your time.
There
At this point, you just want to make one.
There you go.
There you go.
Just make it. Just make it.
And at the end of the day, it's not a bad move. You're putting the pressure, obviously, on Mac McClung to have to make a dunk, but Buzelis didn't make a dunk.
Right? No, you're not putting the pressure on Matt McClung, because Matt McClung puts the pressure on you.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying you have to get a score.
Yes, indeed. You know,
Well, he's on the board.
Yes.
He scored, right? It wasn't either one of his first 2 dunks, which to me were a little bit more creative.
Yeah.
This just gets him on the board as Giannis celebrates.